The ammonia fumes burned my nostrils as I scrubbed the marble floor of the Castellano mansion's grand foyer. My knees ached from kneeling on the cold stone for the past hour, the cheap pads I'd bought from the dollar store doing little to cushion the unforgiving surface. I pushed a strand of dark hair that had escaped my ponytail back behind my ear with my forearm, careful not to touch my face with my chemical-soaked gloves. This was my reality now. Rachel Morgan, 26 years old, reduced to scrubbing floors in a mansion that could fit my entire apartment building inside its walls. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, I'd been working toward my nursing degree, living a modest but hopeful life. Then everything changed the night I witnessed something I should never have seen. I squeezed more solution onto the floor, watching it foam between the tiles. The scent of lemon mixed with bleach created a nauseating combination that had become as familiar to me as my own reflection. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the October sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, reminding me that my shift had already stretched past its scheduled end time. "Rachel!" Mrs. Chen's sharp voice echoed through the foyer, her heels clicking against the marble I'd just cleaned. "You missed a spot near the base of the staircase. Mr. Castellano notices everything." I bit back a sigh and crawled toward the indicated area, my back protesting the movement. Mrs. Chen was the head housekeeper, a stern woman in her 50s who ran the domestic staff with military precision. She wasn't cruel, just exacting, and I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not with rent due in 2 weeks and my savings account hovering dangerously close to zero. "Yes, Mrs. Chen, I'll take care of it right away." She stood over me for a moment, her expression softening slightly. "You look exhausted, Rachel. When was the last time you took a day off?" I couldn't remember. Between this job and my weekend shifts at the diner, I barely had time to sleep, let alone rest. But admitting weakness wasn't an option. "I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well last night." That was an understatement. The nightmares had returned, vivid and terrifying. Tyler Hayes' face, twisted with rage as he realized I'd seen him pull the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoing in my memory, the way his eyes locked onto mine before I ran. Even now, thinking about it made my hands shake. "Well, finish up here and then you can go. The evening staff will handle dinner service." Mrs. Chen's voice pulled me back to the present. "Oh, and Mr. Castellano wants to see you in his study before you leave." My stomach dropped. In the 6 months I'd worked here, I'd never been summoned to Ryan Castellano's study. I'd seen him, of course, tall, imposing, moving through the mansion with the kind of authority that made everyone straighten their spine. Dark hair always perfectly styled, suits that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and eyes that seemed to see through any pretense. Everyone knew who Ryan Castellano really was. The legitimate business empire was just a facade for his real operations. He controlled half the city's underground activity, commanded loyalty through a combination of fear and respect, and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless with anyone who crossed him. Working in his home meant keeping your head down, your mouth shut, and never ever asking questions. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. Mrs. Chen's expression was unreadable. He didn't say. "Just finish up and go see him. Don't keep him waiting." I worked faster, my mind racing through possibilities. Had I broken something valuable? Overheard a conversation I shouldn't have? I was always so careful to be invisible, to move through the mansion like a ghost. That was how people like me survived in places like this. 20 minutes later, I stood outside the heavy oak door of Ryan's study, my cleaning supplies abandoned in the service closet. I'd washed my hands and face, but I was still wearing my worn uniform, a simple gray dress that hung loosely on my frame. I'd lost weight since taking this job, too stressed and busy to eat properly. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. Through the door, I could hear the low murmur of voices. Was he meeting with someone? Should I come back later? Before I could decide, the door opened, revealing a man I'd seen before. One of Ryan's associates. Antonio, I thought his name was. He looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain before stepping aside. "He's expecting you," Antonio said, his voice carrying that slight Italian accent that many of Ryan's inner circle shared. I stepped into the study, my sensible shoes silent on the Persian rug. The room smelled of leather, aged wood, and expensive cologne. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with what looked like first editions. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind it sat Ryan Castellano. He didn't look up immediately, his attention focused on some documents spread across his desk. This gave me a moment to observe him, something I'd never dared to do up close. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with the kind of sharp features that suggested both intelligence and danger. A faint scar ran along his jawline, barely visible but somehow adding to rather than detracting from his appearance. "Close the door," he said without looking up, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my chest. I did as instructed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The click of the latch felt unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. I perched on the edge of the seat, my back straight, hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Ryan finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I held his gaze, some stubborn part of me refusing to cower. "Rachel Morgan," he said, as if testing the weight of my name. "You've been working here for 6 months." "Yes, sir." "Mrs. Chen says you're reliable, quiet, thorough." He leaned back in his chair, still watching me with that unsettling focus. "She also says you seem educated beyond what one would expect for someone in your position." My throat tightened. I'd tried so hard to blend in, to be unremarkable. I attended college briefly. Circumstances changed. Nursing, wasn't it? The fact that he knew this sent a chill down my spine. Of course he'd had me investigated before hiring me. Men like Ryan Castellano didn't let strangers into their homes without thorough background checks. "Yes, sir. I had to leave the program." He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already knew. "And before that, you lived in the South District, worked at a convenience store, until 3 years ago, when you suddenly moved, changed jobs multiple times, and eventually ended up here." I said nothing. What could I say? He clearly knew more about me than I was comfortable with. "I'm curious, Rachel. What made you leave the South District so abruptly?" This was dangerous territory. I'd spent 3 years trying to disappear, to become nobody worth noticing. And here was one of the most powerful men in the city, asking questions I couldn't afford to answer. "Personal reasons, sir. I needed a fresh start." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement? Respect? I couldn't tell. "A fresh start," he repeated. "How's that working out for you? Scrubbing floors in my home? Is this the fresh start you imagined?" The question stung, probably because it was true. This wasn't what I'd imagined for myself, but pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. "It's honest work, sir. I'm grateful for the employment." Honest. He seemed to find that word particularly interesting. "Yes, I suppose it is." He stood suddenly, moving to the window that overlooked his extensive grounds. "I have a proposition for you, Rachel." My stomach clenched. Nothing good ever started with those words. "My younger brother is getting married in 2 weeks. It's a significant event, high society, important families, the kind of wedding that will be photographed and discussed in certain circles." He turned to face me. "I need a date." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, sir?" A date, someone to accompany me to the wedding. Someone who won't have expectations afterward. Someone who understands this is purely a business arrangement. I don't understand. Surely you have... I stopped myself before saying anything that might offend him. Surely I have what? Options? A slight smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. I have many options, Rachel. None of them suitable for this particular occasion. My brother's wedding is complicated. There are people who will be there, people who have expectations about my personal life. Showing up with someone like you sends a very specific message. Someone like me, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. You mean someone insignificant, someone disposable. I mean someone who exists outside the circles I usually move in. Someone who has no connections to my business, no family ties to exploit, no ulterior motives beyond the substantial payment I'll provide for this service. Payment? $20,000 for one evening of your time. All you have to do is accompany me to the wedding, make polite conversation when necessary, and leave when I leave. You'll be provided with appropriate attire, coached on basic etiquette, and compensated handsomely for your trouble. $20,000. The number was staggering. That was more than I made in a year of scrubbing floors and serving tables. With that money, I could pay off my debts, maybe even go back to school. I could stop looking over my shoulder every time I walked down the street, afraid that Tyler Hayes had finally found me. But nothing was ever that simple. There had to be a catch. Why me specifically, sir? You must have other employees who would... Other employees talk. You don't. I've watched you these past 6 months, Rachel. You keep your head down, do your work, and mind your business. That's a rare quality. It's also exactly what I need for this situation. He'd been watching me. The thought sent another chill through me, though I wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely. I need to think about it, I said, surprised at my own boldness. Ryan's eyebrow arched slightly. You need to think about it, he repeated, as if the concept of someone turning down his offer, even temporarily, was foreign to him. Very well. You have until tomorrow evening to decide. But Rachel? He moved closer, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. This is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're afraid of, $20,000 can buy you a lot of security. Think carefully. He knew. Maybe not the specifics, but he knew I was hiding from something. Someone. The realization that I was so transparent to him was terrifying. You're dismissed, he said, returning to his desk as if I'd already ceased to exist. I stood on shaky legs and walked to the door, my mind spinning. My hand was on the handle when his voice stopped me. Rachel, one more thing. Whatever decision you make, this conversation stays between us. Mrs. Chen and the other staff don't need to know about this arrangement. Understood? Yes, sir. I fled the study, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. $20,000. One evening. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But God help me, I was tempted. So desperately tempted. I collected my things from the staff room in a daze, barely registering Mrs. Chen's goodbye. The bus ride back to my apartment in the shabby part of town felt longer than usual, my mind replaying the conversation with Ryan over and over. Why would someone like him need to pay for a date? He was wealthy, powerful, and admittedly attractive in a dangerous sort of way. He could have any woman he wanted. So why me? What message was he trying to send by showing up with someone so obviously beneath his social standing? My apartment was dark and cold when I arrived. I'd kept the heat off to save money, another sacrifice that had become routine. I changed out of my uniform and into sweatpants and an oversized sweater, The closest thing to comfort I allowed myself these days. $20,000 could change everything. I could move somewhere safer, somewhere Tyler Hayes would never think to look for me. I could go back to school, finish my degree, build the life I'd always wanted before that terrible night 3 years ago. But at what cost? Getting involved with Ryan Castellano, even tangentially, was dangerous. He was a criminal, plain and simple, no matter how legitimate his business facade appeared. Going to his brother's wedding meant stepping into his world, even if just for one night. What if that was enough to paint a target on my back? Then again, I already had a target on my back. I'd had one for 3 years, ever since I witnessed Tyler Hayes murder someone in cold blood. Ever since I'd run instead of going to the police, too terrified of what Hayes might do to me if I talked. At least Ryan's money could help me disappear properly, maybe even leave the city entirely. I spent the night tossing and turning, unable to shut off my racing thoughts. By the time dawn broke, painting my dingy apartment in shades of gray, I'd made my decision. It was reckless, probably stupid. But I was tired of being afraid, tired of scraping by, tired of looking over my shoulder. I would do it. I would be Ryan Castellano's date to his brother's wedding. And if that made me a fool, well, at least I'd be a fool with $20,000 in my pocket. I arrived at the Castellano mansion the next evening with my decision weighing heavily on my chest. Mrs. Chen had given me a curious look when I'd asked to speak with Mr. Castellano, but she'd simply nodded and directed me to wait in the sitting room off the main entrance. It was a space I'd cleaned countless times but never actually sat in, and perching on the edge of the velvet sofa felt like transgressing some invisible boundary. The room smelled of furniture polish and fresh flowers. A massive arrangement of white roses sitting on the side table that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I ran my hands over my jeans nervously, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked in this elegant space. My second-hand jacket was fraying at the cuffs, my shoes scuffed despite my best efforts to keep them presentable. "Rachel." Ryan's voice came from the doorway, and I jumped slightly, startled. He moved so quietly for such a large man. Tonight he wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that somehow looked as expensive as his usual suits. "I take it you've made your decision." I stood, my hands clasped in front of me to keep them from shaking. "Yes, sir, I'll do it. I'll be your date to the wedding." Something flickered across his face. Satisfaction, perhaps, though it was gone too quickly for me to be sure. "Good. That's very good." He gestured for me to sit back down, taking the chair across from me. "We need to discuss the details. The wedding is 2 weeks from Saturday. Between now and then, you'll need to be fitted for appropriate attire, given some basic instruction on the social dynamics you'll encounter, and briefed on what's expected of you." Briefed? The word made it sound like a military operation. My family is complicated. There are certain people who will be at this wedding, certain expectations about who I might bring. You'll need to know the basics, names, relationships, topics to avoid. Nothing too complex, but enough to prevent any awkward situations. The way he said awkward situations made it clear he meant something far more serious than a social faux pas. "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I did. Not really. Ryan leaned forward, his dark eyes intent on mine. "Do you, Rachel, because once we do this, once you walk into that wedding on my arm, people will take notice. They'll want to know who you are, where you came from, what you mean to me. Are you prepared for that kind of scrutiny?" I thought of Tyler Hayes, of the 3 years I'd spent trying to be invisible. The idea of being scrutinized, of being noticed, terrified me. But I'd already made my choice. "I can handle it," I said, with more confidence than I felt. He studied me for a long moment, as if trying to read something in my expression. Finally, he nodded. "We'll see. Tomorrow evening, a car will pick you up from your apartment at 7. You'll be taken to a boutique where you'll be fitted for a dress, and whatever else is necessary. The owner is discreet and accustomed to my requests. She'll know what's appropriate. Tomorrow, that's very fast. We have limited time and there's much to prepare. After the fitting, you'll come back here for dinner. We'll discuss the wedding, the family dynamics, and what I expect from you that evening. He stood, signaling the conversation was coming to an end. One more thing. Until the wedding, you'll continue your regular duties here. No one on staff is to know about our arrangement. As far as they're concerned, you're simply continuing your work as usual. Of course. I rose as well, feeling dismissed but also strangely relieved. The longer I stayed in his presence, the more aware I became of the power differential between us, the danger inherent in what I'd agreed to. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me again. Rachel, don't disappoint me. I don't react well to disappointment. The quiet threat in his words followed me all the way home. The next day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. My regular shift at the mansion felt surreal, mopping floors and dusting surfaces while knowing that in just a few hours, I'd be stepping into a completely different role. Mrs. Chen commented that I seemed distracted, and I blamed it on not feeling well, which wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach had been in knots since yesterday. At 6:30, I was back in my apartment, staring at my closet, and wondering what one wore to be driven to a private boutique by a Mafia Boss's car service. I settled on the best jeans I owned and a simple black sweater, nothing that would embarrass me too badly. The car arrived exactly at 7, a sleek black sedan that looked wildly out of place on my rundown street. The driver was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of alert awareness that suggested military or security training. He opened the door for me without a word, and I slid into the leather interior, feeling like an imposter. The boutique was in the upscale district, the kind of neighborhood I usually only pass through on my way to other places. The driver pulled up to a storefront with darkened windows and an unmarked door. Before I could reach for the handle, it opened from the inside, revealing an elegant woman in her 50s, with silver hair styled in a perfect chignon. "You must be Rachel," she said warmly, though her eyes assessed me with the practiced gaze of someone accustomed to transforming people. "I'm Margot. Please, come in." The interior of the boutique was like stepping into another world. Soft lighting, plush carpeting, and racks of the most beautiful dresses I'd ever seen. The space smelled of expensive perfume and possibility. "Mr. Castellano has given me specific instructions," Margot said, guiding me toward a private fitting area. "He wants something elegant, but not ostentatious. Something that will complement rather than compete." She pulled out several dresses in various shades of blue and gray. "These colors will work beautifully with your complexion. Let's start with this one." The next hour was a whirlwind of trying on dresses, each more beautiful than the last. Margot was professional but kind, never once making me feel inadequate despite the obvious differences in our worlds. Finally, we settled on a dress in deep midnight blue, simple in design but exquisitely tailored. The fabric felt like water against my skin, and when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. "Perfect," Margot declared. "Now for shoes, and perhaps a simple necklace. Mr. Castellano mentioned you should have everything you need." By the time we finished, I felt like Cinderella preparing for the ball. Except my prince was a dangerous criminal, and this wasn't a fairy tale. The driver loaded several garment bags and boxes into the car, and then we were heading back across the city, but not toward my apartment. "Where are we going?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Mr. Castellano's residence, miss. He's expecting you for dinner." Of course he was. I looked down at my jeans and sweater, suddenly feeling woefully underdressed for dinner at the mansion. But it was too late to do anything about it now. Ryan was waiting in a smaller, more intimate dining room than the grand one I'd seen while cleaning. A table was set for two, candles flickering in silver holders, and the smell of something delicious wafted from covered dishes. "Rachel," he greeted me, standing as I entered. Tonight he wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. It was the most casual I'd seen him, and somehow that made him seem more dangerous, not less. "I trust the fitting went well." "Yes, sir. Margot was very helpful. The dress is beautiful." "Good. Sit, please. We have much to discuss, and I prefer not to conduct important conversations on an empty stomach." A staff member I didn't recognize served us, some kind of chicken dish with vegetables and a sauce I couldn't identify, but tasted incredible. I ate carefully, hyper-aware of my table manners, while Ryan seemed completely at ease. "Tell me about yourself, Rachel," he said after a few minutes of silence. "Beyond the basic facts I already know. What made you want to become a nurse?" The question surprised me. I'd expected him to launch into instructions about the wedding, not ask about my abandoned dreams. "My grandmother," I said quietly. "She raised me after my parents died when I was 8. Car accident. When she got sick, I took care of her. A nurse would visit sometimes, and I was amazed at how much she could do, how much comfort she could provide. I wanted to be like that for other people." "And your grandmother? She's gone now?" I nodded, pushing food around my plate to avoid meeting his eyes. 5 years ago. Cancer. I was already in nursing school by then, but after she died, I had to work more hours to pay for it. That's when I took the job at the convenience store in the South District, where you witnessed something you shouldn't have. My fork clattered against my plate. I looked up sharply, my heart suddenly racing. "I don't know what you mean." Ryan set down his own utensils, his expression unreadable. "Don't insult my intelligence, Rachel. I told you I had you investigated. 3 years ago, you were working the night shift at a convenience store. You left that job abruptly, moved apartments twice in the span of 6 months, and dropped out of school despite being on track to graduate. That's the behavior of someone running from something. Or someone." My mouth went dry. "I don't want to talk about this. Unfortunately, we need to. If you're going to be seen in public with me, I need to know what threats might emerge. Who are you hiding from?" I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "This was a mistake. I can't do this. I should go." "Sit down, Rachel." His voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "You've already agreed. You've already accepted the arrangement. Walking away now would be unwise." The implicit threat hung in the air between us. I slowly sank back into my chair, my hands trembling in my lap. "I'm not going to hurt you," Ryan said, his tone softening slightly. "But I need to know what I'm dealing with. Who are you afraid of?" The words came out before I could stop them, 3 years of terror and silence suddenly overwhelming my better judgment. "Tyler Hayes. I witnessed him kill someone at the convenience store. He was in an argument with another man in the parking lot, and I saw him pull a gun and shoot him. I was taking out the trash, and I saw everything. Tyler saw me see him. I ran inside and locked the door, and he just left. But I knew he'd come back for me, so I ran first." Ryan's expression didn't change, but something cold and calculating entered his eyes. "Tyler Hayes, local enforcer for the Marino family. Small time but vicious. You know him?" "Of course he did. They probably moved in the same circles." "I know of him. We're not friendly." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Did you go to the police?" I shook my head. I was too scared. Everyone knows the Marinos have cops in their pocket. I thought if I reported it, Tyler would find out and kill me before anything could be done. So I just disappeared. I've been moving around ever since, trying to stay invisible. And you've been successful for 3 years. That takes discipline. Intelligence. He paused. "Why didn't you leave the city entirely?" "I couldn't afford to. And I thought staying in the city, hiding in plain sight, Might be smarter than running somewhere unfamiliar where I'd have no resources. Ryan nodded slowly, as if my reasoning made sense to him. Tyler Hayes is a problem, but he's a problem I can handle. What? No, I didn't tell you this so you could... So I could what? Protect my investment? His eyes met mine. That's what you are now, Rachel. An investment. I've paid for your dress, arranged for your transformation, and I'm about to pay you $20,000. I don't let my investments get threatened by small-time thugs. The cold, businesslike way he discussed my life was jarring, but there was something else beneath it. Something that almost felt like genuine concern. I've been fine for 3 years, I said quietly. As long as I stay invisible, I'm safe. You won't be invisible after the wedding, Ryan countered. You'll be photographed. Your face will be in society pages on social media. If Tyler Hayes has been looking for you all this time, there's a chance he'll see those photos. That's a risk we need to mitigate. Cold dread washed over me. I hadn't thought about that. I'd been so focused on the money, on the temporary escape it could provide, that I hadn't considered the exposure. The very real possibility that by trying to save myself, I might be signing my own death warrant. I need to cancel, I said, panic rising in my throat. I can't do this. I can't risk... Too late. Ryan's voice was firm. You've already agreed, and I've already made arrangements. But more importantly, Rachel, you've just told me about a threat to your safety. Do you really think I'm going to let you walk out of here and go back to your inadequate apartment in a bad neighborhood where Tyler Hayes could find you at any time? What are you saying? I'm saying you're moving into the guest house on my property, tomorrow. You'll continue your work at the mansion, but you'll live here where I can ensure your safety. After the wedding, once we've dealt with the potential exposure, we can reassess. I stared at him, unable to process what he was suggesting. You want me to move in here? I want you alive and useful. Having my date murdered before the wedding would be inconvenient. He said it so matter-of-factly, as if we were discussing a business transaction rather than my life. This isn't a request, Rachel. It's a condition of our arrangement. You want the $20,000? You follow my rules. I should have been furious at his high-handed dictates, at the way he was taking control of my life. But beneath the anger was something else. Relief. For 3 years I'd carried the burden of my safety alone, constantly vigilant, always afraid. The idea of letting someone else shoulder that responsibility, even someone as dangerous as Ryan Castellano, was seductive in its own way. When? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Tomorrow afternoon. I'll send someone to help you pack and transport your belongings. Don't worry about your lease. That will be handled. By tomorrow evening, you'll be settled in the guest house, and we can begin preparing you for the wedding in earnest. He stood, signaling that dinner was over. Antonio will drive you home tonight. Pack what you need for tomorrow. Clothes, personal items, anything you can't replace. Leave the furniture and anything too large. You won't need it. I rose on shaky legs, still trying to absorb the rapid changes to my life. In the span of 2 days, I'd gone from invisible cleaning woman to kept woman, housed on the property of one of the city's most dangerous men. Rachel, Ryan said as I reached the door. I turned back to find him watching me with that intense gaze that seemed to see through all my defenses. You made the right choice. Trusting me, I mean. Whatever you're afraid of, whatever's chasing you, I'm more dangerous. Remember that. It should have been terrifying. Maybe it was, but as Antonio drove me back to my apartment through the dark city streets, all I could think was that for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel quite so alone. The moving van arrived at my apartment at 2 o'clock the next afternoon, along with 2 men who moved with the efficient precision of military personnel. They weren't the kind of movers you'd find in the phone book. These were Ryan's people, which meant they were probably capable of far more than just carrying boxes. I'd spent the morning packing my meager belongings, surprised by how little I'd accumulated in 3 years of running. A few changes of clothes, some books from thrift stores, my grandmother's jewelry box with its handful of precious items, and the nursing textbooks I couldn't bring myself to sell, even though I'd probably never use them again. My entire life fit into 4 boxes and 2 duffel bags. "That's everything, miss?" one of the men asked, surveying my tiny apartment with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or just professional assessment. "That's everything," I confirmed, taking one last look around. The apartment had never felt like home. Nowhere had since my grandmother died, but it had been my refuge, my hiding place. Leaving it felt like severing the last connection to the person I'd been before that terrible night 3 years ago. The drive to the Castellano estate was longer than I'd expected, taking us out of the city proper into the countryside, where old money built their fortresses away from prying eyes. The guest house, as Ryan had called it, was larger than any place I'd ever lived. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a living room with a fireplace, and windows that overlooked gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. "Mr. Castellano asked me to give you this," one of the movers said, handing me an envelope after they'd deposited my boxes in the living room. "He said you should read it and be ready by 6. Inside was a note in sharp, angular handwriting. "Dinner at the main house. Dress casually. We'll be discussing the wedding details and your role. The house is secure. You don't need to lock the doors. No one enters this property without my knowledge. R." The casual assumption that I'd simply comply with his summons irritated me, but I was too exhausted to fight it. Besides, he was right. I'd agreed to this arrangement, and that meant playing by his rules, at least for now. I spent the afternoon unpacking, trying to make the guest house feel less like a gilded cage and more like a temporary home. My few belongings looked lost in the spacious rooms, emphasizing just how far I'd fallen from the life I'd once imagined for myself. The nursing textbooks I lined up on a shelf in the bedroom, a reminder of dreams deferred, but not entirely abandoned. At 5:30, I showered in the bathroom that was larger than my previous bedroom, trying not to think too hard about the expensive toiletries already stocked there, chosen by someone who'd anticipated my needs before I'd even agreed to move in. The level of control Ryan exercised was unsettling, yet I couldn't deny the seductive comfort of being taken care of not having to worry about every penny. I dressed in jeans and a soft gray sweater, the nicest casual clothes I owned, and made my way to the main house as the October sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The air smelled of autumn leaves and wood smoke from somewhere on the property, and for a moment, I could almost forget the complicated web I'd entangled myself in. Ryan answered the door himself, surprising me. He wore dark jeans and a black Henley that emphasized his broad shoulders, and his hair was slightly damp as if he'd also recently showered. There was something disconcertingly intimate about seeing him this way, less polished than usual, almost approachable. "Right on time," he observed, stepping aside to let me enter. "I appreciate punctuality." "I got your note," I said, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. It wasn't exactly a request. A hint of amusement flickered across his face. "No, it wasn't. I find requests often lead to unnecessary negotiations. I prefer clear expectations." He led me not to the formal dining room where we'd eaten before, but to a more casual space off the kitchen. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and 2 place settings waited on a rustic wooden table. I thought we'd eat here tonight, more conducive to conversation. The meal was simpler than before. Pasta with a rich meat sauce, fresh bread, a crisp salad. Ryan served it himself, no staff hovering nearby, which somehow made the evening feel even more surreal. Here I was, having dinner alone with one of the most dangerous men in the city, discussing a fake relationship as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Tell me about your family," I said, after we'd eaten in silence for a few minutes. If I was going to attend his brother's wedding, I needed to understand the dynamics I'd be walking into. Ryan took a sip of wine before answering. "My father, Marco Castellano, built the empire I now run. He was old school, believed in loyalty, family, and maintaining appearances. He died 5 years ago, heart attack. My mother followed 6 months later. Broken heart, the doctors said, though I suspect she simply couldn't imagine life without him." There was genuine grief in his voice, carefully controlled but present. It humanized him in a way that made me uncomfortable. It was easier to see him as a dangerous criminal than as a man who'd loved and lost his parents. "I have one brother, Luca, and one sister, Sophia. Luca is younger by 3 years, the golden boy who was supposed to stay clean, go legitimate. He's marrying Isabel Chen, daughter of a prominent businessman with ties to various interests. It's a strategic alliance as much as a love match, though I believe Luca genuinely cares for her." "And your sister?" A shadow crossed his face. "Sophia is the youngest. She's at university, studying art history. She's been kept as separate from the family business as possible. That was my father's wish, and I've honored it." "She doesn't know what you really do?" "She knows enough. She's not naive. But she's not involved, and she never will be if I can help it." The protective edge in his voice was unmistakable. Whatever else Ryan Castellano might be, he clearly took his role as older brother seriously. "So why do you need a date?" I asked, setting down my fork. "Surely there are women in your social circle who would jump at the chance to attend this wedding with you." Ryan's expression became guarded. "There are women who would attend, yes. But they would have expectations, assumptions about what my interest in them might mean. Bringing you sends a different message, that I'm not available, not interested, but still fulfilling social obligations. It keeps certain people from reading too much into my attendance." "Certain people," I repeated. "You mean women who want to be the next Mrs. Castellano?" "Among others." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "There's also my brother to consider. Luca has been pressuring me to settle down, stop living like a monk in this house. He thinks I need someone to humanize me, make me seem less intimidating to his new in-laws. Showing up with you accomplishes that without committing me to anything long-term." The clinical way he discussed using me as a social prop should have offended me more than it did. But I understood transactional relationships. I'd agreed to one after all. $20,000 for one night of pretending to be someone I wasn't. "What story do we tell people?" I asked. "How did we meet? How long have we been seeing each other?" "We keep it vague. We met through the household. You were working at the estate. We struck up conversations. There was an attraction. We've been quietly seeing each other for a few months. Nothing serious yet. But I wanted you to meet my family. It's close enough to the truth to be believable, and vague enough that people can't poke too many holes in it." I nodded slowly, trying to imagine myself selling that story to a room full of wealthy, connected people who would see right through me. "What about the way I talk, the way I act? I'm not exactly fluent in high society etiquette." "That's why we're starting your education tonight." Ryan stood, gesturing for me to follow him to the living room. He'd set up a laptop on the coffee table, and as he opened it, I saw photos of various people. "These are the key players you'll encounter at the wedding. You need to know who they are, how they're connected to my family, and what topics to avoid." For the next 2 hours, Ryan walked me through a complex web of relationships, alliances, and rivalries. The Chen family, who Luca was marrying into, had their own empire built on imports and exports, legitimate on the surface, with darker operations underneath. Isabel's father, James Chen, was traditional and protective of his daughter, skeptical of the Castellano family's reputation, despite the strategic advantages of the union. James will likely assess you as a potential threat or asset, Ryan explained, pulling up another photo. He'll want to know if you're serious enough to indicate I'm settling down, or casual enough to suggest I'm still playing the field. Either answer is acceptable to him for different reasons. Just be polite, defer to me if he asks probing questions, and don't engage if he tries to discuss business. There were others, cousins, associates, family friends, each with their own agendas and positions in the complicated hierarchy of this world. My head spun, trying to keep track of names and faces, the careful diplomacy required to navigate even casual conversation. "This is insane," I said finally, rubbing my temples. "How am I supposed to remember all of this?" "You'll have notes. I'll provide you with a small dossier to review before the wedding, and I'll be with you the entire time. If anyone asks something you're uncomfortable with, look to me. I'll redirect the conversation." He closed the laptop, his dark eyes meeting mine. "You're not in this alone, Rachel. I know I'm asking a lot, but I wouldn't have chosen you if I didn't think you could handle it." The unexpected vote of confidence warmed something inside me that had been cold for a long time. When was the last time someone had believed in my capabilities, had seen me as more than just a struggling survivor? "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Ryan said, his tone shifting slightly. "The physical aspects of our arrangement." My stomach tightened. "Physical aspects?" "We'll need to appear comfortable with each other. That means basic touches, my hand on your back, your arm through mine, perhaps standing close enough that people believe we're intimate even if we're not. Are you comfortable with that level of contact?" I thought about it, about letting this dangerous, controlled man into my personal space in ways I hadn't allowed anyone in years. It should have terrified me. Instead, there was an unexpected flutter of something that wasn't quite fear. "I can handle it," I said, echoing his earlier confidence in me. "Good. We'll practice over the next 2 weeks. Small touches, casual intimacy. By the time of the wedding, it should feel natural." He paused, something unreadable passing across his face. "I want to be clear, Rachel. This arrangement is strictly business. The touches I'm describing are for appearances only. I'm not expecting anything more from you." The emphasis on not expecting felt important, as if he were establishing boundaries for both of us. I should have felt relieved. I did feel relieved. But there was also a tiny, treacherous part of me that wondered what it would be like if this were real, if Ryan's interest in me extended beyond a convenient arrangement. I pushed that thought away immediately. That way lay danger of a different kind. "I understand," I said firmly. "Strictly business." He nodded, though his eyes lingered on me a moment longer than necessary. "It's getting late. I'll walk you back to the guest house." The night air was crisp and clear, stars visible in a way they never were in the city. We walked in silence through the gardens, the only sounds our footsteps on the stone path and the distant call of an owl. When we reached the guest house door, Ryan turned to face me. "You did well tonight," he said quietly. "Learning all those names and relationships. You're quick, adaptable. That will serve you well at the wedding." "Thank you." I wasn't sure what else to say. Standing this close to him in the darkness, I was acutely aware of his presence, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way he towered over me, the controlled power he radiated even in stillness. "Get some rest," he said, stepping back slightly. "Tomorrow we'll continue your preparation. Margot is coming to do a final fitting on your dress, and in the evening, we'll practice some of those casual touches I mentioned. The more natural it feels, the more convincing we'll be." He turned to leave, then paused. "Rachel, lock your door tonight. I know I said the property is secure, but old habits matter. Lock your door." It was a small concession to my autonomy, an acknowledgement that despite everything, I still had some control over my own space. As I watched him disappear into the darkness toward the main house, I realized that Ryan Castellano was far more complicated than I'd given him credit for. Dangerous, yes. Controlling, absolutely. But also protective in his way, capable of surprising kindness. That realization should have comforted me. Instead, it made everything more complicated. It was easier to be afraid of a monster than to start seeing the man underneath. I went inside and locked the door, as he'd suggested. But as I lay in bed that night, in a guest house on a dangerous man's property, surrounded by luxury I'd never dreamed of, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a threshold I could never uncross. Whatever happened at that wedding, whatever exposure came from it, my life would never be the same. The question was whether I was walking toward salvation or destruction, and the terrifying answer was that I honestly couldn't tell the difference anymore. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur of routine and transformation. My mornings were spent performing my usual cleaning duties at the mansion, though now I lived just steps away in the guest house. The other staff members had noticed my sudden change in residence, and I'd caught whispers and speculative glances, but no one dared ask questions directly. Mrs. Chen's expression had grown cooler, more distant, as if she'd mentally recategorized me from employee to something else entirely. My afternoons and evenings belonged to Ryan. We met daily, sometimes for meals, sometimes just to talk, and always to practice the role I'd be playing at the wedding. He was patient but exacting, correcting my posture when I slumped, teaching me how to hold a wine glass properly, drilling me on names and faces until I could recite the entire guest list from memory. "You're a quick study," he'd said one evening, a note of approval in his voice that made me feel ridiculously pleased. "Most people need months to learn what you've absorbed in days." "I'm motivated," I'd replied, thinking of the $20,000 waiting at the end of this performance. But there was more to it than that, I was beginning to realize. Part of me wanted to prove I belonged in this world, even temporarily. That I was more than just a desperate woman scrubbing floors. The physical proximity exercises had started awkwardly. Ryan would place his hand on the small of my back, and I'd stiffen involuntarily, my body remembering old fears and violations. But he was patient, never pushing, always telegraphing his movements so I knew they were coming. "Breathe," he'd murmur when he felt me tense. "I'm not going to hurt you, Rachel. Just breathe." Gradually, my body learned to accept his touch, the weight of his hand guiding me through a doorway, his arm around my waist as we stood side by side, the brush of his fingers against mine when he handed me a glass. Small intimacies that began to feel almost natural, which was precisely the point. What I hadn't anticipated was how these practiced touches would affect me. There was something undeniably magnetic about Ryan when he let his guard down, when he smiled at something I said or laughed at my nervous attempts at small talk. In those moments, I could almost forget what he was, almost imagine this was real. That was dangerous thinking, and I knew it. It was the Thursday before the wedding when everything shifted. I'd spent the morning cleaning one of the guest suites, lost in the mindless rhythm of work, when Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Castellano wants to see you in his study," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Immediately." The urgency in that final word sent alarm bells ringing. I dropped my cleaning supplies and hurried through the mansion, my heart pounding. When I reached the study, the door was already open, and Ryan stood by the window, his posture rigid with tension. "Close the door," he said, without turning around. I did, my hands suddenly clammy. "What's wrong?" He turned to face me, and the cold fury in his eyes made me step back involuntarily. In his hand was a tablet, and he held it out to me silently. I took it with trembling fingers and looked at the screen. It was a social media post from someone named Jennifer Milano, apparently a cousin or friend of Isabel's. The post featured several photos from what looked like a bridal shower, but it was the caption that made my blood run cold. "Can't wait for the wedding this weekend." Heard Ryan Castellano is finally bringing a date. Some mystery woman he's been hiding. Very curious to meet her. Check Chance. Castellano wedding. Mystery date. The post had hundreds of likes and dozens of comments, people speculating about who I might be, whether Ryan was finally settling down, and expressing excitement about getting a glimpse of his private life. This was posted 2 hours ago, Ryan said, his voice dangerously quiet. It's already been shared across multiple platforms. Your face isn't in any of the photos, but your existence is now public knowledge. Everyone who matters knows I'm bringing someone to the wedding. I looked up at him, not understanding why this was such a crisis. Isn't that what we wanted? For people to know you had a date? I wanted it known at the wedding, in a controlled environment where I could manage the narrative. Not splashed across social media days in advance, giving people time to dig, to speculate, to investigate. He took the tablet back, his jaw tight. This changes things. Changes them how? Tyler Hayes. The name sent ice through my veins. If he's been looking for you, if he's monitoring for any signs of your reappearance, this post could lead him right to you. People are already trying to figure out who you are, posting speculation. It's only a matter of time before someone connects the dots, sees you at the estate, recognizes you from the South District, mentions it online. The reality of what he was saying crashed over me. I'd been so focused on the wedding itself, on playing my role convincingly, that I hadn't fully considered the digital footprint this would create. In trying to buy my safety with Ryan's money, I might have inadvertently painted a target on my back. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan moved to his desk, pressing a button on his phone. Antonio, come to the study. He looked back at me. We move up the timeline. You don't leave this property until the wedding. No exceptions. And I'm putting additional security on you. Someone will be within earshot at all times, including at the guest house. You're putting a guard on me? The idea of being watched constantly made my skin crawl, even if I understood the necessity. I'm protecting my investment, he said, though something in his eyes suggested it was more than that. And we're accelerating the background work I've been doing on Tyler Hayes. I've had people looking into his current operations, his movements. It's time to neutralize that threat permanently. The casual way he discussed neutralizing a human being should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a complicated mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that someone was finally doing something about the shadow that had haunted me for 3 years. Guilt that my cowardice, my refusal to go to the police back then, had allowed Tyler to walk free all this time. Antonio appeared in the doorway, his expression alert. Ryan gave him a series of rapid instructions in Italian, too fast for me to follow, even if I'd understood the language. Antonio nodded, his eyes flicking to me briefly with something that might have been sympathy before he left. What did you tell him? I asked. That you're not to be left unguarded. That anyone approaching you needs to be vetted through me personally. That the guest house is to be monitored externally, not internally. He moved closer, his intensity almost overwhelming. I meant what I said before, Rachel. You're under my protection now. Nothing is going to happen to you. The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, was both comforting and terrifying. This was a man who was accustomed to controlling every variable, to eliminating threats with ruthless efficiency. And now I was one of those variables, something to be protected because I served a purpose in his carefully ordered world. Why does this matter so much to you? I asked suddenly, the question escaping before I could think better of it. You could find another date, someone without all this baggage. Why go to all this trouble for me? Ryan studied me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. Because I understand what it's like to live in fear, to constantly look over your shoulder, wondering when the past will catch up with you. My father built this empire on blood and violence, and I've spent my entire adult life trying to legitimize it, to create something more than what he left me. But the shadow of what we were, what we did, never fully goes away. He moved to the window again, his back to me. When I saw your file, when I read about how you'd been running for 3 years, surviving on scraps, never giving up, I recognized something in you. Resilience, the will to keep going even when everything's stacked against you. That's rare, valuable. And yes, I'm using you for my own purposes. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let you be hurt in the process. The honesty of his admission stole my breath. This was the most Ryan had revealed about himself, about the motivations beneath his calculated exterior. And in that moment, I saw him clearly, not as the monster I'd wanted him to be, but as a man shaped by circumstances beyond his control, trying to carve out something better from a legacy of darkness. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for protecting me, for seeing me as more than just a means to an end." He turned back, and there was something in his eyes that made my heart skip. "You've never been just a means to an end, Rachel. If I'm honest with myself, you stopped being that the first time we had dinner together and you looked at me like I was a person instead of a title. The air between us felt charged suddenly, heavy with unspoken possibilities. I should have stepped back, reminded us both that this was strictly business. Instead, I found myself moving closer, drawn by something I didn't fully understand. "Ryan," I started, not even sure what I was going to say. His phone buzzed loudly, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, and his expression immediately hardened. "I need to take this. It's about Hayes." He looked at me, and I could see the effort it took him to shift back into business mode. "Go back to the guest house. Antonio will be there within the hour to brief you on the new security protocols. And Rachel?" He waited until I met his eyes. "We're going to handle this. All of it. You're safe here." I nodded and left, my mind spinning. The walk back to the guest house felt longer than usual. Every shadow suddenly suspicious. Every sound potentially threatening. For 3 years, I'd lived with fear as my constant companion. I'd thought that accepting Ryan's arrangement might provide escape from that fear. Instead, it seemed to have amplified it. But there was something else mixed with the fear now. A strange sense of not being alone. For the first time since that terrible night at the convenience store, someone knew my secret and was actively working to protect me. Not because they had to, but because they'd chosen to. That realization was more dangerous than any physical threat, because it made me want to trust Ryan Castellano, to believe in him, to imagine that maybe this arrangement could become something more. And trusting dangerous men had never ended well for women like me. Antonio arrived at the guest house exactly 1 hour later, accompanied by a woman I hadn't seen before. She was in her early 30s, dressed in dark tactical clothing, with alert eyes that constantly scanned our surroundings. "This is Elena," Antonio said by way of introduction. "She'll be your primary security detail. She'll maintain a perimeter around the guest house at night and accompany you anywhere you need to go during the day." Elena nodded at me professionally. "I'm not here to intrude on your privacy, Ms. Morgan. You won't even know I'm there most of the time. But I need you to understand something. If I tell you to do something, you do it immediately, no questions. That's how we keep you safe." "I understand," I said, though the reality of having a bodyguard was still surreal. Antonio pulled out a tablet similar to the one Ryan had shown me earlier. "We've been monitoring Tyler Hayes' known locations and associates. He's still operating in the South District, primarily enforcement work for the Marino family. What concerns us is that he's been asking questions lately, about a woman who disappeared 3 years ago, someone who witnessed something she shouldn't have." My chest tightened. He's looking for me. He's been looking for you the whole time, Antonio said bluntly. What's changed is the intensity. 2 weeks ago, he apparently told someone he had a feeling you were still in the city, that he'd find you eventually. That suggests he's gotten some kind of lead, though we don't know what. The timing was too coincidental. 2 weeks ago was exactly when I'd agreed to Ryan's arrangement, when I'd started preparing for the wedding. Had something I'd done tipped Tyler off somehow? Or was it just paranoia seeing patterns in random events? Mr. Castellano wants you to know that he's taking care of this, Antonio continued. Hayes is a problem that will be resolved before the wedding. You have his word on that. There was something final in the way he said resolved, a euphemism that couldn't quite hide the darker meaning beneath. Part of me wanted to object, to insist that murder wasn't the answer, but that was naive. Men like Tyler Hayes didn't stop because you asked nicely. They stopped when they were forced to. What do I need to do? I asked instead. Exactly what you've been doing. Prepare for the wedding. Let us handle security. And trust that Mr. Castellano has your best interests at heart. Antonio's expression softened slightly. I've worked for him for 10 years. I've seen him handle dozens of complicated situations. He doesn't make promises he can't keep, and he doesn't let threats to his people go unanswered. You're one of his people now, Ms. Morgan. That means something. After Antonio and Elena left, I sat in the guest house living room, trying to process everything that had happened. The wedding was in 2 days. Tyler Hayes was actively looking for me. Ryan was planning something that would resolve the threat permanently, and I was sitting in the middle of it all, a pawn in games I barely understood. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Ryan. Dinner at 8, just us. We need to talk about Saturday. Short, direct, very him. I texted back my agreement and spent the next few hours trying to distract myself with unpacking the last of my boxes, though most of my belongings were already put away. Eventually, I gave up and simply sat by the window, watching the sun set over the estate grounds, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. At 7:50, I walked to the main house, Elena maintaining her promised discreet distance behind me. Ryan answered the door himself again, and I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes that suggested he'd had a difficult afternoon. "Come in," he said, his voice gentler than usual. "I thought we'd eat in the kitchen tonight. Somewhere less formal." The kitchen was warm and inviting, with a pot of something aromatic simmering on the stove. Ryan ladled soup into bowls while I sat at the large island, feeling strangely domestic despite the surreal circumstances. "I spoke with my people about Hayes," he said, without preamble. "The situation is more complicated than I initially thought. He's not just looking for you casually. He's obsessed. 3 years of searching, following dead ends, refusing to let it go. That kind of fixation is dangerous." "What are you going to do?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Ryan set a bowl in front of me, his expression serious. "What needs to be done? But not before the wedding. I won't have that day disrupted by this mess. After Saturday, once you're safely photographed as my date and the social obligation is fulfilled, we'll handle Hayes permanently." "Permanently," I echoed. "You mean kill him?" "I mean ensure he never threatens you again." Ryan sat across from me, his dark eyes holding mine. "Does that bother you? Knowing I'm capable of that?" It should have. By all rights, I should have been horrified, planning my escape from this man and his violent solutions. But I'd lived with fear for 3 years, always looking over my shoulder, never truly safe. The idea that someone was finally willing to end that threat, to protect me the way no one else ever had, was intoxicating. "No," I admitted quietly. "It doesn't bother me as much as it should." "What does that say about me?" "It says you're a survivor, that you understand sometimes violence is the only language certain people understand. He reached across the island, his hand covering mine. The touch was gentle, almost tender. "You're not a monster for wanting to be safe, Rachel. You're human." We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the soup warming me from the inside. Eventually, Ryan brought up the wedding logistics, the timeline, where we'd sit, who I'd likely interact with. "Luca wants to meet you beforehand," he said. "Tomorrow evening he and Isabel are coming for dinner. It's his way of vetting you, making sure you're not going to embarrass him at his wedding." "And if I do embarrass him?" I asked, half joking. "You won't." Ryan's confidence in me was absolute. "You've worked harder to prepare for this than most people prepare for actual relationships. You'll be fine." The mention of actual relationships hung in the air between us. This wasn't real, I reminded myself. This was business, a transaction, temporary. No matter how comfortable I was starting to feel with Ryan, no matter how his touch made my pulse quicken, this would end after Saturday. "Tell me about them," I said, changing the subject. "Luca and Isabel, what are they really like?" Ryan's expression softened in that way it always did when he talked about his family. "Luca is everything I'm not. Charismatic, optimistic, convinced the world can be made better through legitimate means. My father wanted him clean, out of the family business, and he's honored that. He runs a venture capital firm now, genuinely legitimate, investing in tech startups and renewable energy. And he doesn't judge you for what you do?" "He judges me constantly," Ryan said with a slight smile. "But he also understands I didn't have the choices he had. I was born first, groomed to take over, shaped by my father's expectations. Luca got to be something different. He knows that, and on some level, he feels guilty about it. That's why he wants you to settle down, to find some happiness outside the business." "Exactly. He thinks if I had someone, some normal part of my life, I might finally step back from the darkness." Ryan's eyes met mine. He's probably right. The vulnerability in that admission made my chest tight. This was the real Ryan, beneath all the control and power, a man who wanted something more but didn't know how to reach for it. "What about Isabel?" I asked, needing to steer us back to safer ground. "Smart, ambitious, perfectly suited to be a Castellano wife even if she doesn't carry the name yet. Her father raised her to navigate these worlds, legitimate and otherwise. She knows exactly what she's marrying into, and she's prepared for it. She and Luca actually love each other, which is rare in these kinds of strategic marriages." "Do you believe in that?" I asked impulsively. "Love, I mean. Real love." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "I've seen it. My parents had it. Luca and Isabel have it. But for men like me, it's a luxury we can't afford. Love makes you vulnerable, gives your enemies leverage. The moment you truly care about someone, they become a target." The implication hung heavy between us, that his protection of me was purely strategic, that whatever connection we might be developing was dangerous for both of us. It was the smart perspective, the realistic one. So why did it make my heart sink? "I should go," I said, standing abruptly. "Tomorrow sounds like it's going to be a long day, and I need to be at my best for meeting your brother." Ryan stood as well, moving around the island to stand in front of me. "Rachel, I want you to know. After Saturday, after the wedding, you don't have to go back to cleaning floors. The $20,000 will be yours regardless. But if you want to stay on the estate, if you want help finishing your nursing degree, that can be arranged." "Why would you do that?" I asked, confused by this unexpected offer. "Because you deserve better than you've had. And because—" He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I've enjoyed having you here. Your presence, our conversations. It would be a shame to lose that just because the wedding is over." My heart raced at the implications. This was supposed to be temporary, a transaction. But Ryan was suggesting something more, some kind of ongoing arrangement. And God help me. I was tempted. "Let's get through Saturday first," I said, not trusting myself to commit to anything more. "Then we can talk about the future." He nodded, disappointment flickering across his face before his usual mask slipped back into place. Of course, Saturday first. As I walked back to the guest house, Elena shadowing me in the darkness, I tried to sort through the tangle of emotions knotting my chest. In less than a week, my entire life had been upended. I'd gone from invisible and afraid to protected and seen, from alone to connected to someone who seemed to genuinely care what happened to me. But that was the danger, wasn't it? Starting to believe this was real. Starting to care about Ryan Castellano as more than just my employer and protector. Because men like him didn't have real relationships. They had arrangements, transactions, strategic alliances. And women like me who forgot that ended up with broken hearts at best, and broken bodies at worst. I locked the door of the guest house as Ryan had taught me, and went to bed. But sleep was a long time coming, my mind replaying every moment of the evening, every touch, every word. Tomorrow I'd meet Ryan's brother and his fiancée. Saturday I'd attend the wedding, play my role, earn my money. And after that, I'd have to decide whether to take Ryan's offer of something more, or walk away while I still could. The smart choice was obvious, the safe choice was clear. So why couldn't I shake the feeling that walking away from Ryan Castellano might be the biggest mistake of my life? Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the November sun streaming through the guest house windows like a benediction. I woke early, my stomach tight with nerves about meeting Luca and Isabel that evening. This would be my first real test, convincing Ryan's family that our arrangement was genuine, that I was someone worth his attention. I spent the morning on my regular cleaning duties, though Mrs. Chen had notably reduced my workload over the past week. The other staff members kept their distance, their whispered conversations falling silent whenever I entered a room. I'd become an outsider among outsiders, no longer one of them, but not truly belonging to Ryan's world either. Caught between spaces, which was somehow fitting given how I'd spent the last 3 years. Elena was a constant shadow. Though true to her word, she maintained enough distance that I could almost forget she was there. Almost. Every time I glanced out a window or turned a corner, I'd catch sight of her alert posture, her hand never far from whatever weapon she carried beneath her jacket. Around noon, Ryan texted, "Take the afternoon off. Margot is coming at 2 for a final fitting on your dress. After that, rest. I need you sharp tonight." I found myself smiling at his bossy tone. A week ago, his commands would have grated against my pride. Now, they felt almost protective, as if he were taking care of me in the only way he knew how. Margot arrived precisely at 2, her silver hair perfect as always, carrying the midnight blue dress I'd tried on weeks ago. "Final adjustments," she announced, gesturing for me to change. "Mr. Castellano wants everything perfect for tomorrow." The dress fit like a dream, the fabric flowing over my body in ways that made me look elegant rather than cheap. Margot circled me critically, pinning here, marking there, her experienced eye catching imperfections I'd never have noticed. "You've lost weight," she observed, not unkindly. "Not eating enough? That's common when people are nervous." "Something like that," I admitted. She smiled, something almost maternal in her expression. "Mr. Castellano is a good man, despite his reputation. I've dressed his family for 20 years. I've seen him with many women, and I've never seen him look at any of them the way he looks at you." My heart skipped. How does he look at me? Like you matter. Like you're not just another pretty face or strategic alliance. Like you're real to him. She finished her adjustments and helped me out of the dress. Whatever is between you two, real or pretend, be careful with him, dear. Men like Ryan Castellano don't open their hearts easily. If he's opened his to you, even a crack, that's not something to take lightly. After Margot left, I sat in the guest house, her words echoing in my mind. Was Ryan opening his heart to me? Or was I reading emotions into practical arrangements because I was lonely and desperate for connection? At 6, I dressed carefully for dinner. A simple black dress that Elena had procured for me, paired with the pearl earrings from my grandmother's jewelry box. They were the only truly valuable thing I owned, and wearing them felt like carrying a piece of my old life into this strange new world. Ryan met me at the door of the main house, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw me. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. "They're already here, in the living room." I took his arm, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. He led me through the house to a spacious living room I'd cleaned dozens of times but never actually occupied. A fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace, and 2 people stood as we entered. Luca Castellano was younger than Ryan, lighter somehow, as if he carried less weight on his shoulders. He had the same dark hair and strong features, but his eyes held warmth where Ryan's held calculation. Beside him stood Isabel Chen, elegant and composed in a cream-colored dress, her dark hair swept up to reveal a long, graceful neck. "So this is the famous Rachel," Luca said, moving forward with an easy smile and extended hand. "My brother has told me very little about you, which means you must be special. He only keeps secrets about things that matter." I shook his hand, grateful for his warm demeanor. "It's nice to meet you. Congratulations on your wedding." "Thank you. And this is my fiancée, Isabel." Isabel's handshake was firm, her assessment of me direct but not unkind. "Rachel, I'm glad Ryan is finally bringing someone to meet the family. We were beginning to think he'd sworn off human connection entirely." "Bella," Ryan said with gentle warning, though there was affection in his tone. "What? It's true." She linked her arm through Luca's, a unified front. "Come, let's sit. I want to hear everything about how you two met." Over pre-dinner drinks, sparkling water for me, wine for the others, I told the carefully crafted story Ryan and I had prepared. How I'd been working at the estate, how we'd struck up conversations, how a mutual interest in books had led to longer talks, and eventually to something more. I kept it vague enough to be believable, detailed enough to seem real. Luca watched me with interest throughout, occasionally glancing at his brother as if gauging Ryan's reactions. Isabel asked more pointed questions about my background, my education, my family. I answered honestly where I could, deflecting gently where I couldn't. "Nursing," Isabel said, when I mentioned my abandoned degree. "That's admirable. Do you plan to return to it?" "I'd like to," I admitted, glancing at Ryan. "Circumstances have made that difficult, but maybe someday." "Ryan could help with that," Luca interjected, his tone pointed. "Heaven knows he has the resources, and it would be good for him to invest in something constructive for once." "Luca," Ryan's voice held a warning edge. "What?" "I'm just saying you spend all your time managing the family business." He emphasized the words meaningfully. "When you could be doing something positive. Helping Rachel finish her degree would be positive." The tension in the room shifted slightly, the easy atmosphere chilling around the edges. This was the judgment Ryan had mentioned, I realized. The loving disapproval of a younger brother who wished his older sibling had made different choices. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "Ryan has already offered to help. After tomorrow, we're going to discuss options for me to return to school." 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. Isabel's curious, Luca's pleased, Ryan's surprised. I'd gone off script, revealed more than we'd agreed to share. But something about Luca's implicit criticism of Ryan had made me want to defend him, to show that he was more than just the dangerous criminal everyone assumed him to be. Really? Luca's face lit up. Ryan, that's excellent. See, Bella? I told you he was still human under all that control. Ryan's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. The touch was warm, solid, real in a way that transcended our practiced intimacy. Rachel has potential that shouldn't be wasted. It makes sense to invest in that. Invest, Isabel repeated, something knowing in her smile. Is that what we're calling it? Before Ryan could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared to announce dinner was ready. We moved to the formal dining room, where an elaborate meal had been laid out. As we ate, the conversation flowed more naturally. Luca and Isabel talked about their honeymoon plans, 2 weeks in Italy, visiting the Castellano family's ancestral homeland. Ryan was mostly quiet, but I caught him watching me throughout the meal, something unreadable in his expression. So, Rachel, Isabel said over dessert, are you nervous about tomorrow? It's going to be quite the production. We tried to keep it small, but our families had other ideas. A little nervous, I admitted. I'm not used to these kinds of events. Just stay close to Ryan. He'll run interference for you. She glanced at her future brother-in-law. He's very good at protecting what's his. The possessive phrasing should have bothered me. Instead, it sent a small thrill through my chest that I tried very hard to ignore. After dinner, Luca pulled Ryan aside for a private conversation, while Isabel and I moved to the living room with coffee. Elena had taken up a discreet position near the doorway, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Can I ask you something? Isabel said once we were settled on the sofa. Woman to woman, off the record. Of course. Are you in love with him? The blunt question caught me off guard. We haven't... It's complicated. That's not a no. She smiled slightly. I ask because I've known Ryan for 3 years, since Luca and I got serious. In all that time, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you're a puzzle he can't quite solve but is desperate to figure out. And I've never heard him talk about helping someone with their education, investing in their future. That's not strategic, Ryan. That's something else. What are you saying? I'm saying that whatever story you two are telling yourselves about this being casual or convenient, I don't buy it. There's something real here, whether you're ready to admit it or not. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Luca told me about your situation, about why you're really here, the arrangement. And I'm telling you that arrangement has already become something more, at least on Ryan's end. The question is whether you feel it too. I wanted to deny it, to insist this was purely transactional. But sitting there, in Ryan's home, wearing clothes he'd provided, protected by security he'd assigned, preparing to attend his brother's wedding on his arm, how could I pretend this was just business? I'm scared, I admitted quietly. Scared of what it means if this is real. Men like Ryan don't do real relationships. They do strategic alliances and temporary arrangements. And women like me, women like you what? Deserve less? Have no right to happiness? Isabel's voice was gentle but firm. I come from this world, Rachel. I know exactly what kind of man Ryan is, what he's capable of. But I also know that the most dangerous men often make the most devoted partners, precisely because they understand the stakes. If Ryan cares about you, really cares, he'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe. Before I could respond, Ryan and Luca returned, both looking more relaxed than when they'd left. Whatever they'd discussed had eased some tension between them. We should head out, Luca said, helping Isabel to her feet. Big day tomorrow, and Bella still has 1,000 things to check on. He turned to me, his expression sincere. Rachel, it was genuinely lovely to meet you. You're good for my brother. I can see it already. He's less rigid around you, more human. Keep doing whatever you're doing." After they left, Ryan walked me back to the guest house, Elena following at her usual discreet distance. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. "You did well tonight," Ryan said as we reached my door. "Luca likes you. That's not easy to accomplish. He has good instincts about people." Isabel asked if I was in love with you. Ryan stopped, his hand on my elbow turning me to face him. "What did you tell her?" "That it was complicated." I met his eyes in the dim porch light. Was I wrong? For a long moment, he just looked at me, something intense and unguarded in his expression. Then he raised his hand, his fingers tracing along my jawline with devastating gentleness. "No, you weren't wrong." My breath caught as he leaned closer, his intention clear. This was the moment where I should pull away, remind us both of the boundaries we'd established. But I didn't want to. God help me. I wanted to know what it would feel like to kiss Ryan Castellano, to close the distance between us, and see if this connection was as real as it felt. His phone buzzed loudly, shattering the moment. He pulled back with a quiet curse, checking the screen. His expression immediately hardened. "It's about Hayes. I need to take this." He stepped away, his voice dropping to a low murmur as he answered. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched his posture shift, shoulders tensing, jaw tightening, one hand clenching into a fist at his side. When he ended the call, he stood still for a moment, his back to me. "What is it?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. He turned back, and the cold fury in his eyes made me step back involuntarily. "Hayes knows about tomorrow. One of the Marino family's associates saw the social media posts about the wedding, mentioned it to Hayes. He's making threats, saying if you show your face in public, he'll be there, that he's tired of waiting, tired of searching, that tomorrow he ends this." The blood drained from my face. "We have to cancel. I can't go to the wedding if..." "We're not canceling anything." Ryan's voice was steel. "Hayes has controlled your life for 3 years. He's stolen your peace, your security, your future. That ends tomorrow. What are you going to do?" He moved close again, his hands framing my face with surprising tenderness. "What I should have done the moment I learned about him. I'm going to remove him from your life permanently. Tonight, before he has a chance to make good on his threats." "Tonight? But my people have located him. He's at a bar in the South District, making his threats public enough that word got back to me within an hour. He's either stupid or so obsessed he doesn't care about his own safety anymore. Either way, it makes him sloppy, vulnerable." His thumbs stroked along my cheekbones. "I want you to go inside, lock the door, and stay there until I come back. Elena will be right outside. You're safe here." "Ryan, don't. Please. Just let him threaten. We can cancel the wedding. I can disappear again." "No." The word was absolute. "You're done disappearing. Done living in fear. Done letting men like Hayes dictate your choices." He leaned his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my face. "Trust me, Rachel. Let me take care of this. Let me protect you the way you deserve." How could I argue with that? How could I refuse when everything in me wanted to accept his protection, to finally be free of the shadow that had haunted me? "Be careful," I whispered. "Always." He pressed a kiss to my forehead, lingering for a moment that felt both too long and not long enough. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness with a fluid grace that reminded me exactly what kind of man he was. I went inside and locked the door as instructed, my heart racing. Through the window, I could see Elena taking up position outside, her alert posture never wavering. I should have felt safe. Instead, I felt terrified. Not for myself, but for Ryan. What if something went wrong? What if Hayes was setting a trap? What if Ryan got hurt or worse because of me? The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to distract myself with a book, with television, with anything that would stop my mind from spinning through worst-case scenarios. But nothing worked. At midnight, I was still pacing the living room, jumping at every sound outside. At 1:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "It's done. Hayes is no longer a threat. Sleep well. Tomorrow is going to be a good day." I stared at those words, trying to process what "no longer a threat" meant. Was Tyler dead? Arrested? Disappeared? Some part of me knew I should care about the distinction, should be horrified by the violence implied. But mostly, I just felt relief flooding through me like a physical thing, weakening my knees until I had to sit down. For the first time in 3 years, Tyler Hayes couldn't hurt me. Whatever Ryan had done, however he'd handled it, I was finally free. I texted back, "Thank you for everything." His response came immediately. "Sleep, Rachel. Tomorrow you're going to be the most beautiful woman at my brother's wedding, and everyone is going to see exactly what you mean to me." I read that message 3 times, my heart doing complicated things in my chest. What I meant to him, not what I represented or what role I played. What I meant. Isabel was right. This had stopped being just an arrangement somewhere along the way. Maybe it had never been just an arrangement at all. I went to bed still wearing my dress, too exhausted to change, and fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in years. No nightmares haunted me. No phantom sounds jerked me awake. For the first time since that terrible night at the convenience store, I slept without fear. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and my phone showed 2 missed calls and a text from Ryan. "Good morning. A car will pick you up at noon. The wedding starts at 2. See you there." I stretched luxuriously, feeling lighter than I had in years. Today was the day. The wedding. The culmination of everything we'd been preparing for. And after tonight, after I'd played my role and earned my money, Ryan and I would have to figure out what we were to each other. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with a cautious, fragile hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could have something real. Something that wasn't based on fear or survival or desperate necessity. Something that was simply mine. I got up and began preparing for the wedding, my hands steadier than they'd been in years. Whatever happened today, whoever saw me and whatever they thought, I knew one absolute truth. I was done running, done hiding, done being afraid. Today, I walked into Ryan Castellano's world not as an employee or a temporary arrangement, but as a woman who belonged there. And tomorrow, I'd wake up and figure out what that meant. The car that arrived at noon was the same sleek black sedan that had carried me to Margot's boutique weeks ago, but today it felt different. Today, I wasn't being transported to another lesson in playing pretend. Today, I was stepping into Ryan Castellano's world for real, in front of hundreds of witnesses who would photograph, judge, and dissect my every move. Elena accompanied me in the car, her presence reassuring even in silence. She'd traded her usual tactical clothing for an elegant black pantsuit that somehow still managed to look functional, her alert gaze scanning every car we passed as we made our way to the venue. The wedding was being held at the Meridian Estate, a historic mansion on the outskirts of the city that had been converted into an exclusive event space. As we pulled through the gates, I caught my breath at the sheer grandeur of it, manicured lawns stretching in every direction, a stone mansion that looked like it belonged in a European fairy tale, and guests already arriving in luxury vehicles that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. "Ms. Morgan," Elena said quietly as we pulled up to a side entrance. "Mr. Castellano asked me to bring you to the private suite he's reserved. He wants to see you before the ceremony begins." My heart fluttered nervously as I followed her through elegant hallways, past staff members preparing last-minute details. The suite was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the gardens where the ceremony would take place. Elena knocked once before opening the door. Ryan stood by the window, his back to us, hands in his pockets. He wore a charcoal gray suit that had clearly been custom-tailored, the fabric draping perfectly across his broad shoulders. When he turned at the sound of the door, his expression shifted from serious contemplation to something that stole my breath. "Rachel," he said, my name almost reverent in his mouth. "You look." He trailed off, seeming genuinely at a loss for words. I'd felt beautiful when I'd looked in the mirror earlier, the midnight blue dress transforming me into someone I barely recognized. But seeing that transformation reflected in Ryan's eyes made it real in a way my own assessment never could. "Stunning," he finished finally. "You look absolutely stunning." Elena quietly excused herself, closing the door and leaving us alone. Ryan moved closer, his eyes never leaving mine, and I noticed he was holding a small jewelry box. "I have something for you," he said. "I was going to wait until after the ceremony, but I realized I wanted you to wear it today. So everyone knows." "Knows what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, he opened the box to reveal a delicate diamond bracelet, elegant, without being ostentatious. This belonged to my mother. She wore it to every important family event. My father gave it to her on their first anniversary. He lifted it from the box, his fingers steady as he fastened it around my wrist. "I want you to have it." I stared at the bracelet, then up at him, my mind reeling. "Ryan, I can't accept this. It's a family heirloom. What will your brother think? Your sister? They'll think exactly what I want them to think. That you matter to me. That this isn't temporary or casual. That I'm claiming you in front of everyone who matters." His hands remained on my wrist, warm and solid. "Unless you don't want that. Unless I've misread what's been happening between us." "You haven't misread anything," I admitted, my heart racing. "But this is all happening so fast. A week ago, I was just your cleaning woman. Now I'm wearing your mother's bracelet, and nothing about this makes sense on paper," Ryan interrupted. "I know that. But when has anything important in life ever made logical sense?" He cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. "I told you I'd take care of Tyler Hayes. And I did. He's been relocated to the West Coast with a very clear understanding that if he ever returns to this city, if he ever speaks your name again, the consequences will be fatal. You're free, Rachel. Actually free. No more running, no more fear. Relief and something darker, guilt, maybe, warred in my chest. What did you do to him?" "Nothing he didn't deserve. Let's leave it at that." His thumbs stroked along my cheekbones. "The question isn't what I did to Hayes. The question is what happens next. Between us. Because this arrangement, this fake relationship we've been performing, it stopped being fake for me somewhere along the way. And I think it stopped being fake for you too. I wanted to deny it, to protect myself from the vulnerability of admitting feelings for a man like Ryan Castellano. But standing there, in his mother's bracelet, with his hands cradling my face like I was something precious, I couldn't lie. It stopped being fake the first time you asked me about my grandmother, I said quietly. When you saw me as a person instead of just a convenient prop. But Ryan, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with someone like you, in your world, with all its dangers and complications. Then we figure it out together. He leaned his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my lips. One day at a time, starting with today, you on my arm, showing everyone that I'm not the untouchable ghost they think I am. That I'm a man who's found something worth protecting. Worth building a life around. Before I could respond, before I could overthink or talk myself out of what I wanted, his lips met mine. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving me space to pull away. but I didn't want to pull away. I'd been alone for so long, carrying my fears and secrets like armor that kept everyone at bay. Ryan had somehow slipped past those defenses, seen the real me, and decided I was worth fighting for. I kissed him back, my hands finding their way to his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and real. 3 weeks of carefully maintained distance finally breaking. When we finally parted, both breathing harder, Ryan rested his forehead against mine. "After today," he murmured. "After we've made our public appearance and satisfied all the social obligations, I want you to stay. Not in the guest house. With me. Really with me. We'll figure out the rest. Your education, your future, all of it. Together." "Yes," I heard myself say, the word escaping before I could overthink it. "Yes, I'll stay." The smile that broke across his face was transformative, lighting up features that were usually so carefully controlled. For a moment, he looked younger, unburdened, genuinely happy. "Good. That's very good." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. "Mr. Castellano," Elena's voice called. "The ceremony is starting in 15 minutes. Ryan stepped back, adjusting his tie and smoothing down his jacket, transforming back into the composed man the world expected to see. "Ready to make our debut?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his mother's bracelet on my wrist, still tasting him on my lips. "Ready." The ceremony took place in the gardens, chairs arranged in perfect rows, facing an arch covered in white roses and ivy. Guests filled the seats in their expensive clothes, their quiet conversations creating a sophisticated murmur. Ryan led me to seats in the second row, his hand proprietary on my lower back, and I felt dozens of eyes tracking our movement. "That's her," I heard someone whisper. "The mystery date." "She's beautiful," another voice murmured. "Not what I expected." "Definitely not his usual type. Where do you think he found her?" Ryan's hand tightened slightly on my back. Whether in reassurance or warning, I wasn't sure. We sat, and I focused on keeping my expression serene, my posture confident. This was the performance I'd been preparing for, but it didn't feel like performance anymore. It felt real. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Luca looked nervous and ecstatic in equal measure as he watched Isabel walk down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than a car. The vows were traditional, but heartfelt. And when Luca kissed his new wife, the genuine emotion in the gesture made my chest tight. That could be real for me too, I realized. Not the lavish wedding or the society spectators, but the genuine connection, the choosing to build a life with someone despite all the complications. The reception was held in the mansion's grand ballroom, with tables set in elaborate displays of crystal and flowers. Ryan and I were seated at the family table with Luca, Isabel, Sophia, Ryan's sister, who turned out to be a sharp-eyed 21-year-old who assessed me with frank curiosity, and James Chen, Isabel's father. "So," James said after the first course, his attention turning to me. "Rachel Morgan. Ryan tells me you're a nurse?" "I was studying to be," I corrected carefully. "Circumstances interrupted my education." "And now?" I glanced at Ryan, who nodded slightly. "Now I'm hoping to finish my degree, with Mr. Castellano's support." James's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ryan doesn't usually invest in educational pursuits. You must be quite special." "She is," Ryan said, his hand finding mine under the table. "Very special." The possessive certainty in his voice made something warm unfurl in my chest. Whatever questions James Chen might have had, Ryan's public claim seemed to satisfy them. The conversation moved on to business matters I didn't quite follow, giving me a chance to observe the room. The guests were exactly what I'd expected. Wealthy, powerful, moving through social interactions with practiced ease. But I also saw the undercurrents Ryan had warned me about, The way certain people watched our table with calculated interest. The whispered conversations that stopped when we looked their way. The photographs being taken on phones, undoubtedly destined for social media. I was being documented, evaluated, my face and presence recorded for anyone to see, including, potentially, anyone from my past who might still be looking. But Tyler Hayes was gone, relocated with clear threats about what would happen if he returned. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't have to be afraid of being seen. Rachel? Sophia's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Ryan's sister was watching me with a small smile. Would you like to escape to the ladies' room with me? These dinners can be suffocating. I glanced at Ryan, who nodded slightly. Sophia led me through the ballroom to an elegant powder room, where she immediately kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. God, I hate these things, she said frankly. All this performing, everyone watching everyone else, nobody actually saying what they mean. She turned to face me, her expression serious despite her casual words. So let me say what I mean. Are you good for my brother? The blunt question caught me off guard. I hope so. He's different around you. Less contained. Like he remembers there's more to life than managing the family business and protecting the family name. She moved closer, lowering her voice. I know what my father built. I know what Ryan does, even though he tries to shield me from it. And I know that men in his position don't usually let people close, don't usually show vulnerability. But he's shown it to you. That means you have power over him. Real power. Please don't abuse it. The protective edge in her voice reminded me so much of Ryan himself. I would never hurt him intentionally, I said quietly. He's given me a future when I had none. He's protected me when I couldn't protect myself. Whatever this is between us, I'm not taking it lightly. Sophia studied me for a moment longer, then nodded, satisfied. Good. Because despite everything, despite the life he leads, Ryan deserves to be happy. We all do. And if you can give him that, even partially, then you're welcome in this family. We returned to the ballroom to find Ryan deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. As Sophia and I approached, the man's eyes flickered to me. Something calculating in his gaze that made my skin prickle. Rachel, Ryan said smoothly, his hand immediately finding my waist as I reached his side. This is Marcus Donovan, an old family friend. Marcus, this is Rachel Morgan. Charmed, Marcus said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Ryan's been quite secretive about you. We were all very curious who could capture his notoriously difficult attention. There was something in the way he said it, something almost threatening beneath the social pleasantries. Ryan's hand tightened on my waist. I prefer to keep my personal life private, Ryan replied, his tone carrying a warning edge. You understand, I'm sure. Of course. Marcus's attention shifted back to me. Still, it must be quite the adjustment. Going from cleaning Ryan's house to being his date. Quite the Cinderella story. The room seemed to freeze. Several nearby conversations faltered as people registered what Marcus had just said, a deliberate revelation of my previous employment, designed to embarrass or expose me as someone who didn't belong. Before Ryan could respond, before the humiliation could fully sink in, I heard myself speak. It is quite the story, I said, keeping my voice steady even as heat flooded my cheeks. Though I prefer to think of it less as Cinderella and more as recognizing opportunity when it presents itself. Ryan saw potential in me that others missed. That says more about his character than it does about mine. I felt Ryan's approval in the slight relaxation of his posture, the proud squeeze of his hand on my waist. Marcus's smile had frozen on his face, his attempt to shame me backfiring as I refused to be ashamed. Indeed, he said finally. Well, congratulations on your good fortune. He moved away, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Around us, I could feel the ripple of what had just happened spreading through the reception. People would be talking about this tomorrow, dissecting every word. "I'm sorry," Ryan murmured in my ear. "Marcus is a jealous bastard who resents anyone else's happiness. I should have anticipated." "It's fine," I interrupted, surprising myself with how true that was. "He's right. I was cleaning your house. That's not something to be ashamed of. Honest work is honest work." Ryan turned me to face him, his expression intense. "That's not what makes you valuable. Your work ethic, yes. Your intelligence, your resilience, your strength. Those are what make you remarkable. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your concern." Before I could respond, the band struck up a waltz, and Luca and Isabel took to the floor for their first dance as husband and wife. Other couples began joining them, and Ryan offered me his hand. "Dance with me," he said. It wasn't quite a command, but close. "Show them all that you belong here. Because you do, Rachel. Not because I brought you, but because you have every right to take up space in any room you enter." We moved onto the dance floor, and Ryan's arms came around me with practiced ease. We'd never actually practiced dancing together, but somehow our bodies knew how to move in sync, his lead confident and sure as we swept across the floor. "They're all watching us," I murmured, acutely aware of the eyes tracking our movement. "Let them watch," Ryan replied. "Let them see that I've found someone who challenges me, who makes me want to be more than just my father's son. Let them see that the Ice King has finally thawed." I looked up at him, seeing past the public persona to the man underneath. "Is that what you are? Thawed?" "With you? Completely." His hand tightened on my waist, pulling me closer than was strictly proper for a public dance. "You've changed everything, Rachel. In the span of 2 weeks, you've made me want things I'd written off as impossible. A real relationship. A future that's more than just managing threats and maintaining control. You've made me want to actually live instead of just survive." The raw honesty in his voice made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. "I feel the same way. You've given me back the parts of myself I thought I'd lost. The ability to trust, to hope, to imagine a future that's more than just getting through each day." "Then we're agreed," he said, his lips close to my ear. "This is real. Whatever started as an arrangement, whatever brought us together initially, it doesn't matter anymore. From today forward, we're building something genuine." "Yes," I whispered, the word a promise and a commitment. The dance ended, but Ryan kept me close as we made our way back through the crowd. People approached to offer congratulations to the newlyweds, and inevitably to satisfy their curiosity about Ryan's mysterious date. I fielded questions with growing confidence, no longer pretending to be someone I wasn't, simply being myself. A woman who'd worked hard, survived impossible circumstances, and found something unexpected with a man who seemed impossible. As the evening wore on, as I laughed with Sophia and accepted genuine warmth from Luca and Isabel, as I watched Ryan interact with his family with less guardedness than I'd seen before, I realized something profound. I'd spent 3 years running from my past, terrified that Tyler Hayes would find me and destroy what little I'd managed to build. But the real danger hadn't been Hayes. It had been the fear itself, the way it had isolated me, kept me small, prevented me from reaching for anything better. Ryan hadn't just protected me from external threats. He'd given me permission to stop being afraid, to take up space, to believe I deserved more than survival. Late in the evening, after the cake had been cut and the bouquet tossed, and most of the guests had moved from dining to mingling, Ryan led me out to a terrace overlooking the gardens. The November air was cold, but refreshing after the warmth of the ballroom, and I wrapped my arms around myself, the diamond bracelet catching the light from the mansion behind us. "Cold?" Ryan asked, immediately shrugging out of his jacket and draping it around my shoulders. "I'm fine," I said, though I pulled the jacket closer, inhaling the scent of him that clung to the fabric. Today was more than I expected. Good more or bad more? Good. Definitely good. I turned to face him, seeing him clearly in the moonlight. I know there will be photographs from today. My face is going to be all over social media tomorrow. A week ago, that would have terrified me. But now I think I'm ready for it. Ready to be seen. To exist in the world again instead of hiding from it. That's because you're not alone anymore, Ryan said, pulling me close. Whatever comes from this exposure, whatever complications arise, we'll handle them together. That's what this means, Rachel. You're not facing the world alone anymore. I leaned into his embrace, feeling safe in a way I hadn't since before my grandmother died. Safe, seen, valued for who I actually was, instead of what role I could play. Take me home, I whispered against his chest. To your home. Our home. I felt his sharp intake of breath, his arms tightening around me. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. We made our excuses to Luca and Isabel, who both smiled knowingly and slipped away from the reception. The drive back to the estate felt longer than usual, charged with anticipation and promise. Elena drove, maintaining her professional distance, while Ryan and I sat in the back, hands intertwined, not needing words. When we pulled through the gates of the estate, Ryan directed Elena to the main house instead of the guest house. Your things will be moved tomorrow, he said. Tonight, you're with me. Inside, the house was quiet, the staff having retired for the evening. Ryan led me upstairs to his private suite, a space I'd cleaned many times but never truly occupied. Now, standing in the doorway with his hand in mine, it felt different. Significant. No more running, he said softly, turning to face me. No more fear. Just us, figuring out how to build something real from this impossible beginning. Just us, I agreed, stepping into his arms, into his space, into the future we were choosing together. Whatever tomorrow brought, photographs, gossip, complications from our vastly different worlds, we would face it together. I wasn't Ryan Castellano's cleaning woman anymore. I wasn't his convenient date or his temporary arrangement. I was simply Rachel, a woman who'd survived impossible circumstances and found something worth fighting for. And he was simply Ryan, a dangerous man who'd let himself be vulnerable enough to love. The rest, the society judgments, the family dynamics, the complicated intersection of our different worlds, we would figure out, one day at a time, together. As Ryan kissed me, as I finally let myself fall completely into the connection we'd been dancing around for weeks, I realized that Margot had been right. Sometimes the greatest risks led to the greatest rewards, and sometimes the most unlikely beginnings led to the most beautiful endings. Or rather, beginnings.